Ladies and gentlemen, the Trump administration is going to impose a lot of tariffs across many different countries and different goods coming into US, and that's going to be a inflationary policy, and that could lead to a crash in the stock market because interest rate will have to rise to combat inflation. Now, this could be a repeat of 2022, but let me analyze the whole thing for you and see whether this is a valid or invalid fear. The biggest financial market fear of a Trump presidency is inflation, 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 because inflation could lead to interest rate rise and crash the entire stock market. And that has already sent the bond market down. And we have to see whether that also lead to a stock market reaction as well. But right now, let me explain to everybody why I think this fear may not be necessary. As usual, these are my disclaimers, and let's go. So Donald Trump has threatened to impose import tariffs from China. Now, what did he actually say? He has vowed to impose massive tariffs upon entering office on January the 20th, okay, calling them the greatest thing he ever invented. So this one, he has been consistent, and he said that he will impose a 10 to 20% tariffs on all foreign goods, not just from China. And for China, a tariff of 60 or higher percent on products coming from China. Specifically for Mexico, he also promised to hit Mexico with a 25% tariffs on all goods if Mexico don't stop drugs from coming into US. And a moment later, he then suggested that the tariffs could even be raised to 100%. And I think that's not a unfair request because Mexico got to stop all the drugs from coming into US because it really is a terrible problem. And last is that he also suggested he could impose tariffs as high as 200% on vehicles imported from Mexico. So a lot of tariffs are being planned, and naturally the recipient of these goods are going to be Americans, right? So the prices would then go up and cause inflation. And the market become jittery, right? So the first thing that has a reaction is the bonds market, right? The bonds yield has gone up, and bond prices has crashed quite a bit. Certainly, this is something that we don't want to see it happen. We might even see a repeat of 2022 if this were to happen in a big way. But let's take a look at the current situation, and let me explain why that this is not likely to happen in a big and ugly way. So first and foremost, how much does US import from China? The amount of goods imported from China was at a high of about $50 billion a month, and somewhat, yes, fallen. Yes, it's dropped quite a bit, right? It's not as much as it used to be. And interestingly, the Donald Trump tariffs that have been in place since 2018, July, is now still going on. Joe Biden didn't remove it, right? So this is something that, interestingly, both presidents are aligned with. But wait, what on earth is inflation? Everybody think that when prices go up, that's called inflation. That's not entirely true. And that's one of the reasons why many people misunderstood the 2022 inflation and missed the entire stock market bull run. Because inflation is not defined as a one-time jump in price. In order for price increase to be qualified as inflation, prices has to increase non-stop. So this year, the price is $1. Next year is $1.50. The following year is $2. The following year is $2.50. And it goes up and up and up and up and up. That's called inflation. If this year is $1, next year is $1.50, and it stays at $1.50, that's not called inflation, okay? That's called a price increase. So the definition of inflation is a sustained increase in general level of prices for goods and services from Investopedia. Now, this is very important. And by the way, that's why I encourage everybody to make sure you understand the economics, and more importantly, for your children to take economics very seriously. So this definition is what a lot of people misunderstood. So everybody is screaming and crying father and mother about the current price increase, and it's terrible. Yes, it is. But that's not called inflation. Inflation only happens when the price increase non-stop. And when I saw that the price increase of 2022 was one time and not sustained, then I realized that the inflation is going to come down tremendously, and it did. And that actually it enabled me to have the guts to slam down into the stock market. And today is reaping a lot of returns. And I've also explained to everybody in 2022 for many, many, many times that that is the reason why I think inflation will come down significantly. So inflation will only happen in a big way in a trade war between China and US if US impose 20% and then China attack back with another 20% or 30%, US further up it, and then finally China up it and up. That's going to cause an inflation, and that's going to be really bad. That's a trade war scenario. Whether that will happen or not, no, it's hard to say. But if it's just a one-time increase, that won't cause much of inflation. So let's look back at the 2018 and 2019 trade war. Interestingly, in 2018 and 2019, when Trump administration hit China with increase in tariffs, inflation did not increase significantly. Now, there are a couple of reasons. Number one is the scale at that point in time could be much smaller than what Trump is threatening right now. The tariffs increase only hit it one time, and that's it, right? So inflation at that point in time was not significant. So this time around, maybe the scale is much larger, and there could be repetition in retaliation. That will cause the inflation. But if the same thing would happen like what happened in 2018, 2019, then inflation is unlikely to increase significantly. Now, that said, Trump is threatening a much larger scale of import tariffs, talking about tariffs across every foreign goods that come in. Now, that's quite jalat, right? That's something that, if it ever happens, will be quite significant. But it's arguable that right now, China has years to prepare for this eventuality. They already knew that US is not friendly to them. And they already knew that more and more of this thing will happen, and they are not blind to it. So even under Biden administration, the tariffs of Donald Trump stayed. So China has been working around ways to overcome these issues. And let me explain what they have done to overcome this issue. One of the most important things they have done is to do what I call nationality laundering. So the Chinese company now has expanded aggressively globally. Many of these companies have laundered their nationality, meaning that they have now repurposed their company. Instead of a Chinese company, they are now no longer Chinese company, but Malaysian, Singapore, Vietnam, India, whatever. So these companies have now expanded and put production plants into Southeast Asia. For example, Shein now is a Singapore company, the company that produces very cheap fashion. TikTok has I would call it a very bad attempt in trying to become a Singapore company by locating their HQ more or less now in Singapore. And of course, the CEO is a Singaporean. But unfortunately, everybody knows already that it's a Chinese company and so on. So many of these companies right now are repurposing their production plants out of China. And therefore, it's no longer made in China, no longer a Chinese company. And they have do some relationship building, some cosmetics to make sure that they are not seen as a Chinese company. Some successful now, some not so successful. But they have re-registered their headquarters into Singapore. So there is an article written, right? How Chinese enterprise de-risked by Singapore washing amidst China-US tension. There was an article written in 2023 by Chu Boon Leong. Several international businesses and investment firms have re-registered or set up headquarters in Singapore to avoid the geopolitical risk stemming from the ongoing China and US tension, right? So these businesses include TikTok, Shein, Neo, the EV manufacturer, and so on. So this is quite interesting, right? So that's why there's a lot of Chinese right now in Malaysia, in particularly KL. We see a lot of Chinese right now. I was told that there are now something like 10 to 15,000 Chinese restaurants. That means Chinese restaurants catering to the Chinese taste in KL right now. I think in certainly in JB there's a lot as well. You see mala huoguo, you see a lot of Chinese style Dongbei cai and all this. All these kind of restaurants are now sprouting anywhere to cater to Chinese taste. And of course, the local Malaysian can enjoy it as well. And China is also trying to de-risk themselves by expanding cooperation with other countries. They have got a lot of zero tariffs regimes right now with developing countries that have diplomatic relation in Beijing, especially with Africa. Africa super love China, super love. You speak to anybody from Africa, most of them actually love the Chinese. I spoke to some African friends, they actually said this. When the Europeans came and colonized Africa, they killed their people, they enslaved them. And what did they do? They extort all the great things out of resources out of Africa. But when the Chinese came, they built trains, they built bridges, they built relationships, they built all sorts of great things. I'm not saying that Chinese don't have an agenda themselves. But right now, the Africans view the Chinese quite differently. Many Africans can speak Chinese. And they even sing very good songs in Chinese. So their relationship with Chinese have now expanded quite well, I would say. And China is trying to push for self-reliance and doesn't depend on US technology right now. And that's something that, over time, we'll see them relying less on US. So in that sense, that fear of a US trade restrictions on China is much lesser. So this is something that is going to lessen some of this impact. Now, the analysts in the market, for example, this gentleman, Jen Kiffin, he actually said that I'm less concerned about tariffs than other people might be. He believes that if the tariffs are around 10 to 15%, a large part of it will be absorbed by the Chinese businesses themselves because they want to keep the business with China. There is a shifting and moving of manufacturing to countries outside China. So that will be less affected by tariffs, right? He believes that severe tariffs like 60 to 100% might only be in areas that are affecting US national interests like EV and electronics. And on general items that people buy, it's going to be a lot less. So this view that of mine is now also shared with some analysts as well. Let's not preclude the possibility that Xi Jinping's government might cut a deal with Trump administration to avoid an all-out trade war. Trump is a very good deal maker, and I would imagine he will first try to see whether the Chinese government is willing to cut some form of a deal to avoid it. Now, it may not happen. This could be in the bag as well. We already see him trying to cut some deals with President Putin's government as well to see how he can bring the closure of Ukraine-Russian war to an end. So it might extend to this area as well. So I would say that while a US tariff increase is likely to happen because Trump is famous for doing it. He has done it before. He said he'll do it again. So most likely that will happen. It is unlikely to lead to a inflation in the mid to long term. So this is unlike the case in 2022, when after the pandemic, there was a huge rise in inflation and that crashed the entire financial market. Now, I will just say this, if there's going to be inflation in US, it's unlikely to be caused by this. It could be caused by other things, right? Many things can lead to inflation. Oil shock when oil prices goes up, labor shortages, and all this. So the tariffs itself is unlikely to lead to an increase in inflation in a big way. But let me tell you when is inflation deadly. And the best part is it's easy to tell when it's deadly. Of course, I should have the hindsight to see this in 2022 when it happened. But now it's proven that this is the biggest cause of inflation. The Nobel Prize winner for economics, Milton Friedman, said this before, and I believed him. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So inflation is particularly deadly when it's printing of money. When it's printing of money, it's going to be very deadly. We saw that happen in 2022. Look at all the prices right now across the world. It's just insanely high, right? So when it is a printing of money, we most likely will lead to a very severe inflation as what we have seen it. Let's watch this situation right now and see whether this inflationary phenomenon will happen. And I personally think that, I don't think it will happen in a big way when Trump administration takes over. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a day or two. Remember, hit like and subscribe, and join us on Telegram channel. Please share your comments as well, and I do read all of them. I'll see you in a day or two. Bye-bye.